As an audience retention producer, I'd hook viewers with one promise. This story keeps escalating. A commander publicly orders a young officer removed. Military dogs react before the humans do. An entire unit stands behind her. A hidden intelligence scheme starts cracking open, and by the end, the same woman they tried to disgrace is the one leading the mission that saves 14 lives. This is the kind of comeback viewers stay for until the final second.
Get her out of my briefing room. The voice of Commander Brett Holloway blasted over the camp-wide radio, feeling like a punch to the gut. I do not care what it takes. Get this individual out. Every soldier at Camp Lemonnier heard that order. Every canine handler and their dog understood his words. But what the commander did not realize was that as he spoke, 29 German shepherds suddenly lifted their heads. It was not a command. It was a bond, built over 3 years by one woman that rank could never touch, and that woman was standing right outside his door. If this story has your attention, please subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Tell me in the comments what city you are watching from. I would love to see how far this incredible story travels. To really get what Zara Cole was about to do, you need to know who she was. The meeting was set for 5:30 in the morning, and Lieutenant Zara Cole was already there, long before anyone else. At just 22 years old, with her dark hair in a tight bun, she wore a simple olive shirt and camo pants. She was not there to make a statement. Her job was to break down Operation Clean Sweep, and she had spent the last 72 hours studying every single report, satellite, photo, and file. She understood the operation better than the man who created it. Commander Brett Holloway walked in at exactly 5:32. He was in his mid-40s and carried himself like a high school quarterback who never got over his glory days. He tossed his folder on the table without a glance at anyone, turned on the display, and started his briefing. Operation Clean Sweep is a go in 40 hours, he announced. Our target is a location in the Eastern District holding 14 civilians. We have confirmed 32 hostiles inside 2 buildings. We will move in from the north, get the hostages, and be gone in less than 40 minutes. Zara studied the map, her eyes locked on that northern route. She looked at it once, then looked again, her focus sharpening. She raised her hand, but Holloway ignored her and kept talking. The main escape path goes right through the bar market. We will have a 3-vehicle team waiting and ready to... Commander. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the room like a knife. I believe there is an issue with that escape route. Holloway stopped talking. He shot her a look of pure annoyance, like he was swatting away a fly. Lieutenant Cole. Yes, sir. This is a mission briefing, not a debate. I understand that, sir. But the northern road runs directly through the Bakar market. At 7 in the morning on a Tuesday, that market will be packed with over 400 vendors and at least 1,200 shoppers. A 3-car getaway through there will not be quiet. It will make us a massive target. The room went dead silent. Holloway just stared at her with a long, cold glare. The intelligence report approved that route. That report was finalized on a Friday, sir. The data for it was collected on a Saturday. The BAR market is only open from Tuesday through Saturday. The crowd on a Saturday is nothing like the crowd on a Tuesday. I have the updated traffic data right here if you would like to see it. Near the back of the room, a man shifted in his seat. It was Senior Chief Darren Wyatt, the head of canine operations for 4 years. He looked up, saying nothing, but now he was listening with everything he had. With slow, deliberate motion, Holloway placed his laser pointer on the table. Where did you get this? From the exact same contractor file your intelligence team used, sir. It is from a company called Meridian Analytics, on page 47. The notes in their own analysis state clearly that the data was from a Saturday. Holloway's jaw went tight. And you believe a small note on page 47 gives you the right to challenge an approved operational plan? I believe a small note on page 47 tells us that 1,400 civilians will be in our direct line of fire when we need to be fast and silent. That sounds incredibly important to me, sir. The tension in the room thickened. A younger soldier, Marcus Webb, 26 years old, and just back from his second tour, glanced at the guy next to him. He did not say a word, but his expression said everything. Holloway puffed out his chest, trying to seem bigger. Lieutenant Cole, this mission has been green-lit from the highest levels. Your point is taken, but it is not changing our orders. We will execute the plan as I have laid it out. Zara met his stare. Sir, if we go in there and meet any resistance in that market, we will have no way to tell civilians from combatants. We will be handing them the advantage. They can just melt into the crowd. That is a hypothetical risk, Lieutenant. It is a mathematical fact, sir. The road narrows to only 40 meters wide in one spot. A gunfight there with 1,400 civilians is not a risk. It is a guaranteed catastrophe. Holloway's voice dropped. It became quiet with that false calm that arrogant men use just before they crush someone. Lieutenant Cole, you are dismissed. Zara's face remained a mask. Sir, I am ordering you to leave this room now and wait for me outside. We will address your insubordination after the briefing concludes. She held his gaze for 3 solid seconds. Then she slowly closed her notebook, pushed in her chair, and stood up. Every single person in the room watched her. 21 soldiers, 4 analysts, and 2 other officers saw a 22-year-old lieutenant, the only person who did her job properly, get thrown out. She walked into the hallway, and the door clicked shut behind her. She stood by herself in the corridor, drawing a slow, steadying breath. She felt the anger build inside her, and then she released it, a control she had fought hard to learn. It had taken 2 years of brutal training and one very difficult deployment to learn how to feel an emotion without letting it show. 30 seconds later, Senior Chief Darren Wyatt was standing beside her. He had come through a side door and approached her without a sound, his arms crossed. You read that whole Meridian report, did you not? Every last page, she said. And the last section? The last section. Wyatt gave a slow nod. He was a solid man with a shaved head and a faint scar that ran from his eyebrow to his jaw. After 20 years in the service, he chose his words with care, knowing each one carried weight. You are not wrong, Cole. I know. That is not what I am saying. I am saying you are right. He knows you are right, and that is about to cause a big problem. She looked him square in the eye. For who? Wyatt dodged her question. Instead, he asked, Did you know that Meridian Analytics has provided the intel for every major operation out of this base for the last 14 months? That was something she did not know. She stored that piece of information away. And did you know, he went on, that in those same 14 months, 3 separate missions have completely fallen apart for reasons nobody can figure out? She stood completely still. What are you telling me, Senior Chief? He glanced back toward the briefing room, then met her eyes again. I am telling you that you just found a very dangerous loose thread, Lieutenant, and I am also telling you to be very, very careful how you decide to pull it. Then he turned and walked back into the room. Zara stood in the quiet hallway for 4 minutes before the world exploded. A loud crackle burst from the radio on the wall. It was the public channel, broadcasting to every command post, every handler station, and every guard post on the camp. Commander Brett Holloway's voice cut through, sharp and arrogant. All stations, this is Holloway. I need 2 security officers to the main briefing corridor, immediately. I have a junior officer here who needs to be escorted from my base of operations. Handle it. The words hung in the air, heavy with malice. Zara heard every one of them. She did not even blink, just absorbed the full impact of his public shaming. And in that exact moment, something happened that Commander Holloway could never have planned for. It was a factor he had no way of measuring, because it was born from a loyalty that his rank could never command. In the canine kennels 40 meters away, a German shepherd named Remy snapped his head up. He had been dozing next to his handler, a 24-year-old specialist named Diego Flores, his partner for 18 months. Remy had not been given a command. His handler had made no move. But the dog stood, turned toward the hallway, and stared right at the spot where Zara was standing. Flores looked from his dog to the empty corridor, then back to his dog. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. From another canine station, 2 more shepherds got to their feet. Then 3 more stood up at the main gate. All of their handlers saw it happen. Wyatt came out the side door again, moving much more quickly this time. His face was like stone. "You heard that broadcast?" he asked. "I heard it," Zara said. "He sent that over the open channel." "I know." Wyatt's voice was low and grim as he looked at her. "Cole, in my 20 years, I have never heard a commander talk about another officer like that on a public channel. Not one time. What he just did was not just telling you to leave a room. The commander tried to humiliate an officer publicly," Zara whispered. "I see what is happening, Senior Chief. What is our next move?" Her gaze went down the corridor. Flores and Remy were waiting. The dog's golden eyes held hers with a steady, knowing look, as if he understood everything. "I am not leaving," she said, her voice solid. "I refuse to be intimidated." Wyatt observed her for a moment before nodding slightly. He changed his radio frequency to the handler's channel and gave a crisp command. "All units, converge on my location." Commander Brett Holloway would be unable to account for the following 4 minutes for the remainder of his service. Out of every entrance, staircase, and adjacent corridor, 29 specialists materialized. They emerged from the eastern quarters, the supply warehouse, and the backup intelligence hub. Each one had monitored the unsecured broadcast. They were all familiar with Zara Cole. They operated on a shared conviction that certain values outweigh authority. One such value is defending a team member when a senior officer unjustly rebukes them for being honest. They assembled in the hall, forming ranks just behind her. An absolute quiet fell over the space. No words were necessary. The sight of 29 specialists was a statement in itself. Beside them, a line of German shepherds sat perfectly still, their attention fixed on the doorway. They stood in composed anticipation. Holloway's voice crackled on the radio once more. "Report from my security team?" Silence was the only answer. From the far end of the corridor, the door opened, and Commander Brett Holloway entered, freezing at the sight that greeted him. He stood motionless. His gaze passed over the specialists, then their canine partners. His eyes finally landed on Zara Cole, positioned in the center holding a file, her face unnervingly calm. "What is the meaning of this?" he asked sharply. Zara held his gaze. "You wanted a response, sir. This is it." It took a lot to rattle Commander Brett Holloway. He had dedicated 23 years to the military, learning to remain unshakable when chaos erupted. Yet in that corridor, confronted by 29 specialists and their dogs all watching him with a shared, silent determination, he felt something he had not experienced for years. The ground seemed to tilt beneath his feet. He regained his self-control in a heartbeat. People like him always look for leverage. He squared his shoulders and pointed a finger at Zara. "Lieutenant Cole, this gathering is unauthorized. I am directing all personnel to resume their assignments now." Nobody budged. Not a single specialist, handler, or canine moved. Holloway's jaw tightened. "That was a direct order. Return to your stations." Senior Chief Darren Wyatt emerged from the formation. He moved with a measured, assured stride, displaying the poise earned from a lifetime of demonstrated bravery. He halted a few paces from Holloway, his gaze unwavering. "Sir, respectfully, you issued a demeaning order on an unsecured channel for the entire installation to hear. Every person here heard it. This is not an unsanctioned gathering. This is a direct consequence of your command." Holloway's tone turned frigid. "Senior Chief Wyatt, you are about to make a choice that will finish your service." "I have faced more difficult decisions," Wyatt answered flatly. From somewhere in the crowd behind Zara, a muffled chuckle could be heard. Positioned 3 ranks back was Marcus Webb, the young specialist from earlier, with his arms folded and a composed expression. His gaze, however, was keen and watchful. Holloway turned his attention back to Zara. "Is this your definition of loyalty? An entire team shielding you?" "No, sir," she replied. This is what I call accountability. The two are not the same. You are a 22-year-old lieutenant who stormed out of a confidential meeting and caused this whole situation. You directed me to exit that meeting, sir, over a public broadcast, immediately after I pointed out a critical safety issue with the north departure path. That issue was assessed and deemed insignificant. By whom, sir? You dismissed it in under 4 seconds without even glancing at my analysis. That is a dismissal, not an assessment. Holloway moved toward her, using his significant height advantage of 8 inches, a tactic he frequently employed to intimidate. Lieutenant, this is your final opportunity to stand down, regain your composure, and follow the established hierarchy. Zara remained perfectly still. And this is your one opportunity, sir, to tell these 29 specialists and their canines why Meridian Analytics has served as the sole intelligence provider here for 14 months, and why 3 of their missions resulted in classified disasters. A profound quiet descended on the corridor. It was the kind of stillness where it seems the air itself has been sucked out of the room. Holloway's expression changed. The shift was subtle, undetectable to an untrained eye, but the 29 professionals in reading human tells noticed it instantly. The expression in his eyes was altered. It was no longer fury, but something closer to apprehension. Positioned with Remy, Diego Flores was the first to notice. He looked over at Wyatt, who had also caught it. How did you find that out? Holloway inquired. His voice had completely changed. His command presence had vanished, replaced by a strained, guarded tone. You told me, sir, Zara responded. I mentioned Meridian Analytics and 3 unsuccessful operations. You never refuted it. It was a brilliant tactical maneuver, among the finest any of them had witnessed. Webb exchanged a look with the specialist beside him, a quiet acknowledgement that this moment would not be forgotten. Holloway took a quick, sharp inhale. He squared his shoulders, having reached a decision. This discussion is over. Lieutenant Cole is now on administrative leave, awaiting an investigation of her conduct. Wyatt, be in my office in 1 hour. The rest of you can go. He spun around and re-entered the room. It was not a break room, but an office equipped with a secure telephone he used for unlisted numbers. The team in the corridor was unaware, but Remy sensed something was wrong. The dog's training made him sensitive to stress and biological cues. As the door latched, he swiveled his head to observe it, the way he would monitor a potential threat. Diego Flores observed his dog's reaction but said nothing. Wyatt turned to Zara. Administrative leave. I caught that. He plans to bury this in bureaucracy before his superiors learn what he did. Then we must reach out to someone with more authority immediately, she responded. Wyatt's expression was a mix of respect and concern. Cole, are you aware of what you are proposing? I am proposing you place a call, Senior Chief. No, I am asking if you grasp the consequences of that call. She met his gaze squarely. I grasp that 14 non-combatants are trapped in a structure with the extractions scheduled in 40 hours. I also grasp that following the existing northern route strategy will result in needless deaths. I grasp that an individual with a financial stake in this operation wants the original plan executed. And I grasp that everyone present heard Brett Holloway publicly humiliate me, and none of them abandoned their post. She paused to let her words resonate. So yes, Senior Chief, I am fully aware of the necessary next step. Wyatt considered this for a second. He then pulled out his private mobile phone. It was not his service radio or issued device, but a personal one. He selected a contact and made the call. Webb leaned over to the man next to him, a seasoned specialist named T.J. Garrett with 14 years and 4 deployments. Who is he calling? Garrett replied without looking away. Someone beyond Holloway's influence. The conversation lasted only 45 seconds. Wyatt was concise. He provided a name and a specific date. He mentioned the phrases open broadcast, Meridian Analytics, and northern exit route. He listened for 30 seconds, then replied, Understood, sir, and ended the call. He looked at Zara. You have got 2 hours. 2 hours for what? before a senior official begins making discreet inquiries. After that, things will escalate quickly. She gave a firm nod. Then we will use every moment. At his hearing, Holloway would describe that period as an unsanctioned contingency planning meeting. The reality was that Zara Cole, 7 specialists, 4 canine units, and Senior Chief Wyatt assembled in the alternate intel center to overhaul Operation Clean Sweep. Zara opened the mission file from Meridian Analytics again. She navigated directly to page 47, located a small annotation, and spoke it for everyone to hear. The note stated the foot traffic analysis was conducted on a Saturday, between 6 in the morning and 10 at night. It projected that 400 to 600 non-combatants would be in the vicinity. Webb pointed at the map. But the operation is set for a Tuesday, he noted. Tuesday is the main market day for the Bakar district. Vendors get there at 5 in the morning. The area is most crowded from 6:30 to 9 in the morning. Zara's tone was resolute. The civilian count during our mission will not be 400 to 600. She turned the page. The actual figure will be nearer to 2,400. Garrett leaned forward, his face serious. That is not a small error. That is an intentional falsehood. Zara nodded. It is a falsehood someone at Meridian hoped would go unnoticed. Flores asked from the back of the room. Who reads all the way to page 47? He answered himself. You do. Zara's calm voice agreed. I do. She then pointed them to a second location that Holloway's strategy had ignored. She had noted her doubts about it before. She now displayed the satellite photos. Observe this building, she said, touching the picture. Meridian called it a derelict warehouse, Garrett agreed. That is certainly what it looks like. It just seems empty on the weekend, she clarified. The eastern shadows reveal a structure not on the official plans. And that is not all. She indicated a small feature in the photograph's corner. The ventilation is brand new. That kind of system is for an occupied structure. A deep silence filled the room. Webb said carefully, Then the target is not at the location we were given. That is highly probable, she replied. They are likely in a building Meridian hid from us. Flores rose to his feet, his posture stiff. If Holloway continues, he will hit an empty target. Or worse, he walks his team into an ambush. The weight of her findings settled in the air. Wyatt said deliberately, Cole, if you are right, this is more than a bad strategy. This operation was designed to fail. She met his gaze directly. I know. It was intentional. This is sabotage, he stated. I am aware, she repeated. Garrett tilted his head back, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. There are 14 hostages who need rescuing in 40 hours, Zara said quietly. This approach will lead to our team's destruction. Webb glanced at Wyatt, Garrett, Flores, and Remy. He saw the other dog handlers lining the room, their animals calm. His attention returned to Zara. All right, what is our next move? Her eyes immediately went to the map. She had already formulated a new strategy in her mind during Holloway's speech. Her plan was complete before he had even concluded. She took a marker and began to draw the alternate route. About 6 minutes into her presentation, the door swung open. It was not Holloway. A man in his 50s in civilian attire stood there, wearing no rank. Yet, he commanded immediate respect. He paused at the entrance, surveying the room. His eyes moved from the map to Zara Cole, a lieutenant advising men with 29 combined years of experience. At last, he spoke. Continue. I am listening. Wyatt immediately snapped to attention. Webb reflexively sat taller. Garrett, a 14-year veteran, stared as shock gave way to recognition. Zara simply held the man's gaze steadily. She had no idea who this man was. In the next minute, she would learn his name. That name would alter the course of the next 36 hours. For now, she met his stare and said clearly, Sir, the northern approach is a lethal ambush. The main objective is a fake, and one of us was aware of it. The man entered the room, pulled up a chair, and took a seat. "Prove it," he commanded. He was Rear Admiral James Corbin. He did not travel for 14 hours from Bahrain just to mediate a minor dispute. His trip began after Darren Wyatt spoke 2 specific words over a supposedly dormant secure line. James Corbin had been waiting 11 months for those words. He sat at the head of the table and heard Zara Cole out completely. This action alone was significant to everyone there. High-ranking officers always interject. It is their nature. They ask for specifics, change course, or identify flaws. Corbin said nothing. He observed her as she detailed the new strategy, his expression unreadable. After she was done, silence descended. Corbin examined the satellite photo for a long time. He turned to Wyatt. "How long has she had this information?" "For 72 hours, sir. Holloway's people saw it first." Wyatt's face was a mask. The proposal was sent in 6 days ago. Holloway's chief intelligence officer approved it. "That officer is a former employee of Meridian Analytics," Zara added quickly. Corbin's head turned sharply to face her. "Repeat that." "Captain Derek Sims, the head of Holloway's intelligence, was at Meridian Analytics for 11 years before he joined the military. He is the one who signed off on this entire mission. The very plan with flawed data on page 47 and an undocumented building." A profound quiet surrounded Corbin. "What is the source for Sims's employment record?" "It comes from his official file on the base system, sir. Almost no one reads beyond the opening paragraph." Webb nearly choked. Garrett stared down at the table. Corbin placed his palms flat on the tabletop. He had the look of a man who found a key after a year of pulling at a locked door. "Lieutenant Cole, are you suggesting a connection between the intelligence firm, the officer who approved this, and the mission?" "I am only presenting facts from the public record, sir. Drawing conclusions is your responsibility, sir." It was the perfect response, and every veteran in the room knew it. She offered no theories or blame. She simply provided the data and deferred the judgment to him. Corbin and Wyatt shared a quick, significant look. "Where is Holloway right now?" Corbin inquired. "He is in his office, sir. He ordered Lieutenant Cole to take leave 2 hours ago. Is he aware you are in this room?" "No, sir." Corbin got to his feet. "Excellent. We will keep that edge." He looked at Zara. "You mentioned an alternate entry." "I did, sir." "Explain it." She returned to the map. Her movements were typically efficient, with no wasted gestures or drama. She described a southern entry using a service road and a different exit by the eastern fence. She suggested a new timeline to get the team past the riskiest area before the morning crowds appeared. She reviewed the proof of the hidden structure, the upgraded ventilation, the revealing shadows, and the missing details in the report. Corbin fired 3 pointed questions at her. It was clear from his inquiries he was probing for flaws in her plan, not just passively hearing it. She addressed all 3 of his points without pausing. He gave a single nod. "What number of people do you require?" Her response was immediate. 22 soldiers and 4 dog teams. "Explain the 4 canine units. If that hidden building contains enemies and bombs, I need 4 dogs on the search, not just 2. Remy's unit has the best success record. He must lead the way." Flores stood a little taller at the back of the room. Corbin turned to Wyatt. "Can you get a team ready in 36 hours?" "I can do it in 24, sir. Proceed." He placed a call that took under a minute. By the time he hung up, Operation Clean Sweep was under new leadership, and Brett Holloway was completely unaware. The entire operation shifted in an instant. The next development, however, caught them all by surprise. Captain Derek Sims entered the room. He moved with the confidence of a man who assumes he belongs everywhere. He entered without knocking and missed the strained mood, anticipating a welcome. He took 3 steps before he finally noticed the Admiral. He froze so abruptly that his aide almost collided with him. The assistant immediately understood the situation and smartly retreated. Sims, however, was caught. Captain Sims was cornered. "Admiral Corbin," he began, his tone mostly firm but with a hint of strain. "I did not know you were here, sir." "That was intentional, Captain." Corbin's eyes scanned the area, noting the map and pictures. His attention rested for a split second on the red circle marking the secret building. It was a brief hesitation few would notice, but Zara noticed it. Garrett noticed it. And Wyatt was studying Sims's reaction. "I require you to exit the room, Captain," Corbin stated. "We will be in touch." "Sir, this meeting is about a live mission, and I am the designated intelligence officer. I am cleared for all planning on clean sweep." "You are cleared," Corbin corrected him. "Captain, I am telling you to leave now." The air in the room grew colder. Sims remained still. In the brief quiet, one could almost feel him weighing his options, what he knew, what they might know, and his personal exposure. Finally, he pivoted and left. The door latched behind him. Webb let out a slow breath. He will start making calls the moment he is out of sight. "I am depending on that," Corbin replied, already holding his own phone. He was giving base security a single instruction. Captain Sims would soon learn that his calls were not going anywhere today. Not one of his calls connected. As Sims desperately tried to reach his allies, the base's secure network was under quiet surveillance. Zara knew nothing about these events. She only saw a shut door, a determined Admiral Corbin, and an operation transforming before her eyes. She turned her attention back to her work, studying the map once more. The initial sign of a new problem came from Flores. He was next to his dog Remy, who had been sleeping peacefully for the past hour, just as usual. 4 minutes following Sims's departure, Remy abruptly got up, his focus riveted on the door. The dog's ears twitched, and his relaxed stance became one of intense readiness. It was a small shift, but Diego Flores sensed it like it was his own pulse. "Remy," Flores said in a low voice. The dog ignored him, his gaze locked on the doorway. Flores went silently to Wyatt's position. "Senior Chief." Wyatt leaned closer. "Remy is signaling a problem at the entrance." Wyatt glanced from the animal to the door. "He is trained to sense stress hormones, elevated cortisol levels. That is his specialty." He addressed the guard. "Inspect the corridor immediately, and be quiet about it." In less than 18 seconds, the guard returned. "Sims is posted at the East Communications desk." Wyatt reported to Corbin, who then looked between Remy and Flores. "Did your canine get a read on him?" "Affirmative, sir." It was a definite stress response. "We detected heightened cortisol and indicators of active deception. My dog is trained to official NCIS protocols. He ignores typical anxiety. He alerts only to the physical signs of concealment." A thick tension settled over the room. Corbin's tone was grim. "So he is deliberately concealing something." "That is right, sir," Garrett added from his seat. The dog knew. It was a fact, not a guess. That single statement changed the entire dynamic, a shift everyone in the room could feel. Corbin stood taller and faced Zara. "Your briefing. How quickly can you have it ready for the team?" "In 2 hours," she replied. "You get 90 minutes. With a sharp nod, she was instantly focused on her work. Wyatt was already on his comms, summoning the team leads. Webb stood up before Wyatt had even signed off. The room went from tense silence to purposeful action in under 10 seconds. This is how elite units operate when a choice is made and time is critical. Amid the activity, Corbin stopped by Zara's station for just 3 seconds. He offered no praise for her finding or any congratulations on her effort. He simply requested a complete written report on every document she flagged after discovering that lone footnote. She met his gaze directly and answered, "Yes, sir." He added, "This report is not for your service record. It is for an official inquiry." At that moment, she understood this was far larger than their current mission. It pointed to a deep corruption that had festered for 14 months, across 3 botched missions and a single contractor holding a lucrative deal. The entire conspiracy was exposed by a small note on page 47 that a single 22-year-old lieutenant took the time to read. Roughly 40 minutes into her brief, as Zara was detailing her plan, the base-wide intercom crackled on. It was Commander Holloway. "Attention all personnel. This is Commander Holloway. I am taking back command of this operation. Effective now. Cease all current planning. Lieutenant Cole is to report to my office with an escort, immediately. A complete hush descended on the room. Nobody moved or made a sound. Zara stopped for only 2 seconds, her eyes on the intercom speaker. She turned back to the map and resumed her presentation without missing a beat. Webb glanced at Garrett, who was studying his own hands. Flores observed Remy. The dog was motionless, his steady amber gaze fixed on Zara. In a corner, Corbin murmured into his phone, his expression unreadable. 6 minutes passed, and just as Holloway's voice returned to the intercom, Corbin finished his call. He strode to the middle of the room, waiting for Zara to finish her thought. She looked his way. He announced, "Commander Holloway is now relieved of duty, pending an official NCIS inquiry. The investigation will include the Meridian Analytics Agreement, this briefing, and 3 previous missions." He let that statement settle in the quiet room. "Lieutenant Cole, you are now in command of this operation. Continue." The room remained silent. Webb stared at the ceiling. Garrett placed his hands on the table and exhaled slowly. Flores noticed Remy cant his head, as though he grasped the shift in leadership. Zara met Corbin's eyes for 3 seconds. Then she addressed the team. "Our launch is in 32 hours. Here is the strategy." The following 32 hours were the most difficult of Zara Cole's career. She did not get a moment of sleep. There was simply too much to accomplish. She was leading a mission that was built on a deception, reconstructing it on the fly with a team that had backed her over their commander only a day ago. Their decision put every one of them in jeopardy. She understood this, and she was determined to validate their trust. She reviewed the new plan 3 times. On her 3rd pass, mostly for her own confidence, she discovered a major weakness in the exit plan. It would have left a pair of vehicles vulnerable for a whole 60 seconds. She fixed the error without a word. True leaders solve issues quietly, but Wyatt noticed. He always did. He approached her later, saying, "That was a sharp adjustment for the Eastern Junction." She looked him in the eye. "Correct. That single minute could have cost us everything." He gave a slight nod, and the conversation ended. 18 hours later, Webb approached her. She sat at the main table, studying photos of the target location for the 11th time. He sat down opposite her. "Can I run something by you?" "Of course." "When you saw that footnote on page 47, did you realize what it meant?" She continued looking at the image. "I knew the plan was flawed." "That is not my question." She at last raised her head to look at him. He was 26, an experienced soldier with 2 tours, and an inquisitive mind she admired. "No," she confessed. "I did not suspect intentional sabotage. I just thought it was poor work. Someone had been careless, and nobody had bothered to double-check." "Then what made you think it was something else?" "It was when Holloway refused to look at the proof. I handed him the file with all my findings, and he brushed it off in 4 seconds without opening it." She paused for a moment. An officer making an honest error acts much differently than one hiding something. Holloway had the look of a man with something to hide. Webb considered that, and you picked up on that. "I have spent my whole life sizing people up," she stated. "It is a skill I learned to survive long before I put on this uniform." He asked no further questions. He gave a small nod, then rose and returned to his post. She went back to studying the screen. Their talk concluded. At the 26-hour mark, Corbin showed up. The determination in his stride signaled that he was bringing fresh intelligence, not just checking in, and new information at this late stage was rarely good news. He took a seat. "In the past 8 hours, NCIS has reached out to 3 ex-employees of Meridian Analytics. 2 have agreed to talk." She remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "The Northern Path was not an error," he stated. "They intentionally used Saturday traffic numbers to falsify the civilian presence. The entire report was a fiction designed to make that approach seem logical for a Tuesday." Corbin laid out the terrible goal. The convoy was meant to go straight into a marketplace with 1,400 civilians. It would have been a catastrophic failure. During the mayhem that followed, the actual target, the building holding the hostages, would have been overlooked entirely. He allowed that revelation to sink in. The enemy guarding those 14 hostages is waiting for a northern attack. They have no idea we are aware of the second building. The reality hit her like a physical blow. The enemy knew their original plan. Someone from their side had betrayed them. The air in the room grew heavy as the scale of the treachery became horribly apparent, far worse than she could have guessed. She breathed out the name, Sims. Corbin confirmed it with a somber nod. Sims, along with at least 2 more from the contracting firm. NCIS has taken them into custody. His gaze was intense. The opposition has our old playbook, but they are completely unaware of your new plan. That is your edge, Lieutenant. It is the only advantage you have. Make it count. She met his stare directly. We will, sir. He began to walk away, then paused. He faced her with a final, shocking update. I should tell you, Holloway filed an official complaint against you. The charges included insubordination, improper conduct, and organizing an unsanctioned mission. She took in the information, her face a mask of composure. And the complaint? She inquired. It has been filed, he verified. It is buried deep in his record, which is currently about 200 pages long. They looked at each other for a tense second. Just finish the mission, Lieutenant. Nothing else is important right now. With that, he departed. She gave herself 30 seconds to absorb it all, then refocused on her work. The operation was set to launch at 4:30 a.m. A profound quiet settled on the base, the type of silence that comes when everyone understands the gravity of the situation. 22 operators readied their gear, assisted by 4 canine teams. At the front were Remy and Diego Flores, a quiet shape moving in the pre-dawn light. Zara assembled her unit, but she gave no big speech about courage. Those are for leaders who lack confidence in their strategy. Instead, she presented 4 simple truths. 14 people are stuck in that building, and they have likely lost all hope. The enemy thinks they know exactly what we are going to do. They are mistaken. Let us go. Nothing more needed to be said. Aboard the vehicle, Webb looked at Garrett. That is all? Just 4 sentences. Garrett checked his equipment. It was all that was required. The vehicles moved out, following the southern path she had planned 30 hours before. Her strategy ensured it. There would be no attack from the north, no busy market, and 1,400 civilians would remain safe from harm. They advanced like ghosts, covering distance and gaining a 4-minute lead on their schedule. When they closed in on the 800-meter point, Remy let out a soft noise. It was not a bark, but a low, distinct alert indicating people were close. Flores raised a closed fist. The entire unit dropped to one knee in perfect sync. Zara crept up next to him. What does he have? Flores watched his canine partner, who was sampling the air. He is sensing several individuals inside. He is working to distinguish them. A moment later, Flores had the answer. They are experiencing extreme duress, high cortisol levels. These are not combatants. And in that instant, Zara realized. The dog had located the hostages. With a look at the building and then her team, she gave 2 quick, silent hand signals. Her operators moved into formation with practiced precision. Flores and Remy took point on the front right flank. Zara was relying on the dog's powerful nose to tell them who was waiting behind every door. The events of the next 22 minutes would later be filed away in cold, sterile reports, completely devoid of emotion. But a single, pivotal image, a moment that would burn itself into the minds of all who were there, was about to unfold. It happened at the 14-minute point. At a back door, Flores and Remy froze. The dog sat down, rigid and alert. That specific trained signal meant only one thing. People were alive on the other side. Flores glanced at Zara, waiting for the go-ahead. She scanned the door, then gave a firm nod. The door flew open, revealing all 14 hostages. The sound that filled the air was something no training could ever replicate. It was the unified gasp of people certain they were about to die. It was the sound of hope crashing back into their lives. Zara was the first to cross the threshold. Her gaze swept the space, confirming 14 civilians, a dozen men and 2 women. A few were standing, but the majority were on the ground. Her tactical scan took under 3 seconds. 4 were badly hurt, 10 were mobile, but every single one was alive. She knelt by the nearest man, about 50, who was shaking uncontrollably. He stared, as if seeing a ghost. She met his gaze. "We are United States Navy," she said, her voice calm. "You are safe. We are taking you home." He gripped her arm, his touch frail but his eyes intense. "We heard them," he rasped. "Last night. They knew the Americans were hitting the market. They were waiting." She looked him directly in the eyes. They were waiting in the wrong spot. The man's eyes widened as her words registered. "You altered the plan." "Yes," she confirmed softly. "We did." He then saw Remy weaving through the hostages, checking each one. A woman reached for the dog, who paused to let her bury her face in his fur and cry in quiet relief. Zara stood and met Flores's gaze as he watched his partner comfort the survivor. "He always knows what people need," Flores murmured. The complete extraction of all hostages was finished in just 11 minutes. All 14 survivors were moved from the building without incident. The 4 most critical cases got immediate medical attention before transfer to the aid station. The team had 0 losses, both human and canine. The whole operation concluded in 33 minutes. As the final hostage was loaded for transport, Wyatt came to her side. He observed the convoy preparing to leave. 33 minutes. 34 until we're in the clear, she corrected. Holloway's strategy would have spent 40 minutes just to secure an empty building. She let the silence say the rest. The mission's success was its own statement. Then, her radio came alive with a burst of static. It was Corbin. His voice carried its normal command, but she detected a new layer of respect beneath it. "Cole, give me a situation report." "All 14 hostages are secure," she responded. "Extraction is done. We are heading back to base." There was a brief pause on the line. "Excellent work, Lieutenant." She keyed her radio twice to acknowledge and got into the truck. Webb was sitting opposite her. He studied her expression for a moment, saying nothing. He understood Zara needed to process events her own way. His silent presence was the best help he could provide. He just sat there, a quiet pillar of support. Beside him, Garrett leaned his head back, closed his eyes, and let a small smile form. It was the simple look of a soldier who was thankful a hard job was finished perfectly. In the rear, Remy curled up by Flores, knowing his job was done. Zara watched the landscape fly by. Her mind returned to page 47 of the mission file. She saw the tiny footnote, hidden under a wall of data. The person who put it there had to be betting nobody would read that far at 5:30 in the morning. She recalled the hostage's hand, his words confirming that the trap had been set at the market. She considered the alternative, the path where she had kept her mouth shut in the briefing. It would have been simpler to raise a small doubt about the plan and then drop it. Questioning superior officers is not a career-enhancing move. The entire system is based on the premise that higher rank means being right. The more senior the officer, the more their word is taken as fact. A 22-year-old lieutenant learns to execute orders, not to challenge a senior officer's bad plan. Yet her whole life had been training for that single act of defiance. 14 people were going home because of one small detail, one gutsy call, and 29 operators who backed truth instead of the chain of command. Zara allowed herself 30 seconds to savor the win. Then she opened her notebook to start her report for Corbin, who would demand every detail. As she wrote, Webb nodded to Garrett. Garrett glanced at Zara, writing by the vehicle's faint light just 30 minutes after a rescue that shouldn't have been possible. He shut his eyes, fully satisfied. "Yeah," he muttered quietly. "That was the one." The official debriefing began at 7:30 that morning and stretched deep into the afternoon. Zara stood before the conference table, answering all questions with the same intense clarity she had maintained for the last 72 hours. She took questions from Corbin's people, from two newly arrived agents from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and a lawyer tasked with creating the official narrative. She faced them all alone, without a lawyer or prepared notes. Her only resources were her notebook and a perfect memory of everything since she first raised her hand. For 2 straight hours, Wyatt stood silently at the back, an observer no one spoke to. The meeting was led by Agent Patricia Hale, a woman in her 50s whose sharp gaze saw everything. She had mastered the Meridian file long before setting foot in the room. Her questions to Zara were precise and cutting. "Lieutenant Cole, when you initially voiced your objection, did you suspect Captain Sims had any connection to Meridian?" Zara answered without hesitation. "No, ma'am." "And did you know about the 3 previous failed missions?" "Only in general terms. Senior Chief Wyatt mentioned them, but that was all." "Then why did you read as far as page 47? Zara met her stare directly. "I read the whole file." Hale paused for a moment. "Most officers don't." "I know," Zara said. "They were banking on that." Hale made a brief note, absorbing the impact of her words, then looked up. "The footnote. Explain exactly what you saw and the conclusion it led you to." So Zara detailed it all: the weekend supply drop, the weekday market crowds, and the deception about 400 to 600 prisoners when it was really 1,400. Zara laid out the information as she had before, sticking to facts without adding feeling or speculation. Agent Hale listened without a single interruption. When Zara concluded, Hale observed, "You designed a completely new mission from that single inconsistency." Zara offered a slight correction. The footnote revealed the flaw. "All the necessary intel was already in our hands. The building plans, the light schedules, the ventilation maps. I did not invent a new plan. I just read the one we had." Meridian Analytics gave them that file, confident the truth was buried too deep for anyone to find. It was a risk they took, and it was a risk that had just cost them everything. That is a critical distinction. Agent Hale put her pen down. She observed Zara for a long moment, her face impossible to read. "Lieutenant, this inquiry has been ongoing for 11 months. You are the one who exposed what they were concealing." A heavy silence settled between them. Zara did not respond. It was not a compliment, but a statement of fact. She accepted it as such. Later that day, she was formally accused of insubordination, professional misconduct, and leading an unsanctioned operation. The board reached its verdict in under 40 minutes. Zara was in the lounge, staring blankly at a wall. It was her first cup of coffee in 36 hours. Wyatt approached her, carrying a folder. "Legal threw out all 3 charges," he said plainly. She glanced at the file. "How?" "First, you obeyed a superior's direct command, which he gave in front of everyone. Second, Admiral Corbin retroactively sanctioned your planning meeting. And last, nobody can dispute the mission's absolute and complete success." He allowed the information to register. 14 for 14, Cole. We had 0 casualties, and it took only 33 minutes. She tightened her grip on her mug. "And Holloway?" "He was relieved of his command while the investigation proceeds." They also took Sims into custody. Investigators are now examining the entire Meridian Corporation. They believe the issue is far larger than a single base. He paused for a moment. "They believe this has occurred before, that intelligence was provided to our adversaries." As the horrible reality sank in, she recalled what Wyatt had mentioned about 3 other failed missions. The missions he was never clear about. She thought of the soldiers from those units who did not return home. "How many?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. It was less of a question and more of a terrible understanding. Wyatt knew precisely what she was asking. "They are still calculating the final count," he replied gently. She set her mug down, her posture suddenly rigid. "All I noticed was a footnote," she said quietly. "You noticed a footnote," Wyatt confirmed, "and you would not let it be ignored." Then 29 operators chose to support you. He leaned in. Cole, that footnote was just a spark. It was meaningless until you turned it into a fire. She looked directly into his eyes. He was 20 years her senior, with a depth of experience she could hardly imagine. He had the expression of a mentor bestowing a legacy. This was about something much more profound than military hierarchy. You are the cause of all of this, he stated. Every single piece of it. She did not object. She simply lifted her mug to take a sip, absorbing the weight of his words. An hour later, Webb, Garrett, and Flores entered. Flores's dog, Remy, was close behind him. The dog went straight to Zara, sat down, and rested his full weight against her leg. It was a clear display of trust. She looked down at the animal. She placed a hand on his coat. He doesn't do that with just anyone, Flores remarked. I am aware, she said. How did you know? She glanced at Remy again. He sensed something was wrong in that corridor before the rest of us. I decided that if he was watching me that intently, I needed to watch him. Flores looked at his canine companion with a new sense of awe, impressed by his intuition even after 18 months working together. Garrett took a seat. The investigators will require more from us. I figured they would, she answered. This will not be resolved quickly. I know. Are you prepared for that? She considered the question for a moment. This was not a short battle, but a long, draining ordeal of giving statements. No, she admitted honestly, but I will do it regardless. A smile finally broke across Webb's face, transforming his entire demeanor. Yeah, he said. I had a feeling you would say that. 3 weeks later, Zara attended a formal hearing in Bahrain. Rear Admiral Corbin led a panel of 5 officers she did not recognize. They examined a file that condensed 72 hours of her life into cold, factual text. Corbin read the summary aloud for the room. He reviewed the timeline, the faulty intelligence, the hidden notation, the confrontation in the hallway, the 29 operators who backed her, the revised plan, and the mission's triumph. His voice remained perfectly steady. When he concluded, he placed the papers on the table. Lieutenant Zara Cole, he began. This panel has examined every aspect of Operation Clean Sweep, from your individual conduct to its ultimate resolution. He paused for effect. All accusations against you are hereby dismissed and will be permanently removed from your record. Your command choices have been officially endorsed. He allowed the silence to stretch for another moment. The panel's finding is unanimous. He made direct eye contact. Effective at once, you are promoted to lieutenant commander. The room was nearly silent. This was an official hearing, not a celebration. There was no applause or cheering. There was only Corbin, 5 other officers, a recorder, and Wyatt, who was once again mysteriously present. Zara stood tall, taking it all in. Lieutenant Commander. She thought about the briefing room at 5:30 that morning. She remembered her own hand rising when no one else would move. She recalled the hallway, the voice on the radio, and the commander who was so sure he would end her career. She envisioned the 29 faces who had faith in her. She saw the dog who sensed trouble first. And she remembered page 47. Corbin rose to his feet, and the other panel members followed his lead. He approached her and extended his hand. As they shook hands, he said quietly, "You never required our endorsement, Lieutenant Commander, but this decision establishes a new benchmark for others to emulate." She met his gaze. "And this is for those who did not make it back from the last 3 missions," she stated. He nodded in complete agreement. "Yes," he affirmed, "for them." That was the victory that truly mattered. It was not about the new rank or the formal handshake. It was for the fallen, for the soldiers who were sacrificed due to a betrayal hidden in a detail nobody else cared to read. She was their voice now, and she would be, always. It was a responsibility she would bear for the rest of her days. Wyatt was in the corridor, leaning on the wall with his arms folded. He appeared completely relaxed, as if he had not just endured a 2-hour proceeding. When she emerged, he said, "Lieutenant Commander Cole." She looked him in the eye. "Senior Chief Wyatt." He unfolded his arms and offered his hand. she accepted it. He held it for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Always read the fine print. She met his stare without flinching. I never stopped. He gave one sharp, decisive nod. Nothing else had to be said. At Camp Lemonnier, inside the kennel where everything began, Remy was resting on his bed. That evening, his handler, Diego Flores, came to see him and recounted the whole story. Flores knew very well that dogs do not receive promotions or military titles. He shared the news with him anyway. After 18 months with a partner who could smell a lie and track 14 people by scent, he was sure Remy understood the important parts. The dog had a right to know. Remy lifted his head and looked straight at Flores. Then he lowered his head back onto his paws. Flores sat on his own bed, simply observing his partner. "You knew the whole time, didn't you, boy?" he said softly. And that is the story of how a 22-year-old lieutenant discovered her strength in a system designed to keep her quiet. She held no high rank, and the structure was stacked against her. She lacked the perfect assurance that leaders are meant to show. She only had one report, a tiny footnote, and the resolve to never back down when every single force told her to surrender. 29 people supported her, demonstrating that truth has power even when it is unwelcome. 14 civilians were reunited with their families because a single person decided to pay attention. And a German shepherd named Remy felt that something was amiss long before any person on that base even knew to ask a question. This story teaches us that loyalty is not about waiting for a command. True bravery is not granted by a position. And the truth, even when buried on page 47 in a note intended to be overlooked, will always find its way to someone courageous enough to seek it. If this story touched you, and if it reminded you of your own inner resolve, please subscribe to our channel to discover what we share next. We would also be grateful if you would comment below with your city's name followed by the word Amen, so we can see how far this story traveled and know that it connected with you. Because some stories are so meaningful that they deserve to be heard by all.